Welcome back to Counting the Cost. I'm Lauren Taylor. Now, this week Al Jazeera featured a series of special reports on food security. According to the UN, 1/6 of humanity is undernourished. That's more than ever before. While countries in Africa may steal the headlines, food security is of global concern. Let's go over to Kuala Lumpur, where Harry Fawcett has more.
Surrounded by emerging economies, Laos, a small landlocked country, is playing catch-up with its bigger neighbours, China, Thailand and Vietnam. Although a large part of the country lies within the Mekong River basin, a fertile area long regarded as the rice bowl of Southeast Asia, many parts of Laos are facing food shortages, and half its children are malnourished. In recent years, the communist government has been actively attracting foreign investment, resulting in a fast pace of economic growth, 7.2% last year. But that's expected to dip to 5.5% this year, as key exports of hydropower, minerals and manufacturing all fall, in line with the global slump. And with signs of a worldwide recovery still tentative, Laos's national priority of lifting itself out of poverty remains a distant prospect. In terms of gross domestic product per head, Laos is ranked 139th out of 177 countries, putting it among the least developed nations in the world. And with rising food prices, increasing cases of land conflict and climate change, food insecurity is expected to worsen. Wayne Hay reports from Laos on a looming food crisis.
It's a hazardous way to earn a living, one that costs lives. Every day these fishermen in southern Laos risk everything to catch fish swimming up and down the Mekong River. At the height of the rainy season, it's a particularly dangerous occupation.
It's very difficult, but I'm not scared. Some fishermen have been killed when they fell into the rapids and went over the waterfalls. But we are all used to this way of fishing.
At this time of the year, everyone's help is needed, and Pansan is now passing on what he knows to his son. While the water's high, the fish are plentiful, and the fishermen push the limits.
Well, this is an example of how the environment has taken away someone's ability to catch food and perhaps earn a bit of money. We've had substantial rain over the last 24 hours, and the Mekong River has risen substantially.
These fishermen have to wait several weeks for the water level to drop and make repairs. 30% of the population of Laos has insufficient food for more than 6 months of the year. It's one of the poorest nations in the world and is welcoming foreign investment and land ownership. The problem is land development often means food supply is sacrificed. Like this suburban wetland in the capital Vientiane, which has allegedly been sold to a Chinese group. And as Laos tries to pull itself out of poverty, the negative impacts of the developments may only get worse.
I mean, they are affecting the way that people live, and they're affecting the way that people have access to food, obtain food to feed themselves and their families.
There is certainly no shortage of rice in Laos, but the challenge is getting it from the areas where it's grown to the more remote parts of the country, where every second child is malnourished.
There are huge disparities within the country. There are surplus areas where the food is being produced, and then there are where the rice is being produced, and then there are areas of great need where people are facing severe food shortages. And it's not a country where the markets are necessarily very free, and so the redistribution isn't happening naturally.
The Lao government says it's determined to improve the lives of its people by attracting foreign money. But in a country where simply putting food on the table is a daily challenge for many, that foreign investment may hinder more than help. Wayne Hay, Al Jazeera, Vientiane, Laos.
Well, joining me now from Manila is Ahsan Tayyab, an economist with the Asian Development Bank. Welcome to Counting the Cost, Mr. Tayyab. As we saw there in Wayne's report, there are real disparities in Laos. If it does produce a large amount of food in some parts of the country, why can't it get that food to the people who need it?
Partly because of poor infrastructure. That's one key issue, especially if you look at the border areas with Vietnam, etc. You find those areas where access is a major problem. Future investments in infrastructure are essential to ensure better food security for these upland areas in Laos.
And Laos has an off-stated aim of dragging itself out of least developed nation status by 2020, and as part of that it's aggressively courting foreign investment. But as Wayne was saying in his report, that investment itself can cause problems when agricultural land is turned away towards other uses.
That's right. I think that's a key area that many of the development partners and the government have been addressing over the last few years. There needs to be better land use planning, land zoning. These are the sort of critical areas where I think ADB and other development partners have been working very closely with the government. Government itself has set up this National Land Management Authority to address this issue and to ensure that these areas are not really taken up and do not really impact adversely on food security.
And Laos has been hit hard by the global economic crisis. Its fast pace of growth has, as we saw in the statistics, taken a hit. What kind of impact will that have on the ability to feed its hungry people?
Well, in that sense, Laos is a bit lucky. I mean, its integration levels are not that high, so we have not seen such a major impact in Laos. The trade opportunities which are localized, within the border areas are still continuing, so you don't see a major impact there. There has been some issues like labor coming back, where if they were working across Thailand, there have been some issues in terms of garments and some commodities like copper being hit. But in general, you don't see the same impact as you've seen in other parts of Asia. So Laos is a bit more resilient, I would say, because of the lack of exposure it has to international markets, and it should do quite well, I think, over time.
Okay, Mr. Ahsan Tayyab, joining us from Manila, thank you very much for your time today.
This week brought good news for the struggling auto industry. After 14 consecutive months of falling sales, the European Car Manufacturers Group reported a 2.4% increase in the number of cars sold across Europe. Some, including Honda, are even posting profits. And one of the continent's oldest car makers, Fiat, is doing surprisingly well. Hamish MacDonald in London has more.
Well, things may finally be looking up for car manufacturers. Despite both Daimler and Peugeot Citroën posting net losses in the first half of this year, their shares rose as investors reacted to news of improvements in their operating profit. But it's the Italian car maker Fiat that appears to be on the road to recovery, as they say. The company recorded close to 12% gains in sales and is going from strength to strength. Earlier this month, the European Commission even gave its blessing to a deal that will see Fiat buying a 20% stake in US Chrysler. It could become a major force in international motoring. Well, Al Jazeera's Jonah Hull went to Turin in Italy to find out the secret of their success.
The visitors' centre at Fiat's Mirafiori plant in Turin is a monument to the company's renaissance. It's really a glorified car showroom with more than a hint of self-satisfaction. Just a few years ago, Fiat was a minnow of the international car market, described by its own CEO as a laughingstock, turning out poor design, struggling with quality issues and losing money. The company was saved by a Canadian import, corporate turnaround specialist Sergio Marchione. He stripped it of loss-making subsidiaries and brutally culled old-school management. The new Fiat then had a big idea. A return to classic form, building reliable cars of Italian design that people actually wanted to drive. And Marchione marched on America. In the midst of a depression, his acquisition of Chrysler turned Fiat global, buying a 10% share of the biggest car market on earth. But globalization has a price.
Marchione's plan for Fiat is, in my view, very ambitious. To create a worldwide group with America, Europe, and maybe one day Asia. In this case, it is probably that Fiat in Turin will become less important.
And Fiat's 90,000 strong Italian workforce seem to know it. The brand has been saved and their jobs for now. But Italy could soon become a far smaller part of a global machine. Andrea Lipani is a plant worker and union representative.
Fiat has a hardcore of conservative workers who don't want to change. It's difficult to make these people understand the challenges we face in keeping our jobs. They want to keep the status quo, but keeping the status quo means we will die.
Perhaps worryingly, top management were gathered in Detroit when we visited Turin. But a company spokesman insisted Fiat would remain true to its roots.
We're the biggest thing in Italy. Fiat is the biggest company in this country. So of course we have an obligation to defend those jobs and to invest.
In its heyday 50 years ago, Fiat was synonymous with chic Italian style. It was also the country's biggest employer. Today, its top-selling model is built not in Italy, but in Poland, with core markets expanding to the Far East and West. Fiat's Italian heartland is in danger of being left behind. Jonah Hull, Al Jazeera, Turin.
And a reminder that you can keep up to date with these and other stories on our website, aljazeera.net/English. Then click on the left-hand side for the business page. That's it from me, Lauren Taylor, this week on Counting the Cost. Thanks for watching.